Hello, hello. Welcome to The Play That Changed My Life. I'm Patrick White. This is a podcast brought to you by Harbinger Theatre and OSM Studios. It's just an elaborate boondoggle to get more theater in my life. So thanks for joining us. We have an extra special guest, I swear. Joining me today is Ari Edelson, the artistic director of the Orchard Project. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Really great to be here.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of yours, and we've been talking off camera, and I'm just like soaking it all in, and I just can't believe how lucky I am. I was approached by the Orchard Project to publicize one of their events coming up this summer. They are in residency. Ari just arrived this past week, but we'll get to that. Let's talk about a little theater news. Did you watch the Tonys?
We did. We had a number of artists arrive from around the country to Saratoga on Sunday, and the first thing they did was all unite to sit around a television set and watch the extremely long pre-broadcast and then broadcast, all 72 hours of that broadcast.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe in total. I think it was I guess it was 5 hours.
Yeah, I was at a wedding, and I checked my phone, and it was like 5, 6 o'clock, and it's like the red carpet has begun. I was like, oh.
Yeah. No, at 8 o'clock after the first show, we thought, what's left to award? There's very little left.
There were a lot of performances, though. First up, Orchard Project, and you had a number of guests there. Was there anyone? Are you a Tony voter?
I am not a Tony voter. No.
Was there anyone you were particularly rooting for?
So I will happily say that the Orchard Project, which develops new work up here in upstate, we had someone involved in the creative team of every single nominated show. Right, so whether it was a director or a writer, Ryan Rummery, who won Best Sound Design for Stereophonic, is an Orchard Project alum. We had someone involved in every single one of those shows.
Crazy.
And so it was really exciting just to see, particularly a generation of theater maker now on the national stage, sort of getting the attention that they so deserve, but also making a generational shift of who is actually telling these stories on the biggest stages in the country.
So how do you bet on this?
But
if they're all your children,
it's like going to Saratoga and betting on a really big trifecta, where you sort of just like do what is it, a box? You just do a box with everybody.
You just have no choice but to cheer every announcement. That's
awesome. It was really great. So, for instance, Justin Levine, who wrote the music to The Outsiders, was an alum of the Orchard Project for 2 years back in, I believe he came in 2012 and 2013, back when we were in Hunter, before we moved up to Saratoga. Adam Rapp, who wrote the book to The Outsiders, had actually come up in 2010 and developed a piece of his in 2010. As I mentioned, Ryan Rummery had done it. The choreographer of Suffs, Mayte Natalia, is an Orchard Project alum. So we were really excited by so many of the pieces.
I admit, when I go to Broadway, the musicals are usually not the first that I go to because they're more expensive. And Proctor's does a heck of a job bringing, the musicals up here. And I might not see Patti LuPone, although I did. But they bring the musicals up here, I know, eventually, but I thought the production numbers, and especially The Outsiders, that kind of like went, oh, I want to see that now.
The production numbers were great. They do cost a pretty penny. For just like getting into gossip area, the average cost to do your number on the Tonys is a good $500,000. So the show actually has to invest a considerable amount of money to put itself out to the rest of the country. Obviously, they think it's worthwhile because so much of the longevity of these pieces of art is actually the life that is generated by the touring market, et cetera, after Broadway. So The Outsiders is a really good example. It's already slating its tour right now. So much of the investment that was made in that production number will translate into bookings at places like Proctor's, and the ability that even if the show on Broadway is a really, really tough nut to crack financially, over the long term, it actually becomes a healthy opportunity for those who are involved in it.
Were you surprised by The Outsiders? I mean, like Hell's Kitchen came in with 13 nominations, and was there another show or the ability to tour? Is it a stronger touring show than Hell's Kitchen?
The challenge, well, see, I think Hell's Kitchen is going to do really well on tour, right? I think then, and actually, just as a little bit of a local plug, Chris Diaz, who is the book writer on Hell's Kitchen, also an Orchard Project alum, but his in-laws are in Schuylerville. So I will actually just sort of say that locally, Chris has got a particular love of the area. Both of those shows actually, I think, are really well made for touring. I think that that was why there was a lot of which of them is going to do well, given the fact that a quarter of the voters for the actual Tony Awards are representatives of the various touring venues. I think that this was a very unusual year, given the post-COVID atmosphere and the fact that I believe there were something like 14 or 15 new musicals. I mean, like new musicals coming out this year.
Yeah.
It was just impossible for there to be something that was like a breakaway favorite. And so in the end, you had of the 5 musicals that were nominated, 3 of them that were really up against one another, right? Suff's, Outsiders, and Hell's Kitchen. And I have a feeling that it was not a massive delta between which one won and the other one that came in second as far as a vote tally. We don't ever hear that. Right. But I think that it was probably I'm guessing it was a very close call, as evidenced by the fact that the rest of the awards that night were very, very split. Right. There was nothing that was a runaway favorite.
Right. I'm split in asking this question. Industry gossip. Stereophonic David Odgme came out saying that they didn't want us performing at the Tonys. That's not. I mean, if they're paying $500,000, like,
well, it's once again, it's the airtime costs. Right. Costs CBS, and they're translate into whatever pharmaceutical ads they have to sell to make CBS work.
What are you saying?
Yes, well, I'm just saying that tends to be what's on my 6-year-old was watching the Tonys. He says, "What are these things?" And I said, "Those are ads." He says, "What are ads?" Because he doesn't, he exists in a world of Netflix and Disney Plus.
Oh,
so
man.
Everybody found that very, very funny. But I think that there was never really a tradition of there being a performance by a play before, right? So Stereophonic was already an outlier, having music that was nominated for Best Score, but it was from a play.
Yeah.
So that was already interesting. And then I think that there was, they thought, okay, if we're going to be even-handed as far as the way that we treat all of the Best Play nominees, we should probably say that it doesn't actually get a performance. But then there was such a clamor to sort of hear some of that music, and to hear some of it, which was really exciting, and then for them to be able to share it. They are living their best life over at Stereophonic right now, and they deserve a lot of it. It's a really great show.
I sat at Playwrights, and I was sitting right in front of Eli Gelb's parents. I know that because they were chatting with everyone. I was like, "Oh, this is so cool."
I remember that I saw it at Playwrights Horizons as well, and I knew that the reviews were going to come out on the Monday, and so I thought, okay, I have to try and get my tickets before the reviews come out, because I have a feeling that everybody's going to want to see this show. Yeah. Everything I had been hearing by any actor or director or writer that I work with was so ebullient about the show, and I remember going with another actor to go and see it that night, and before the show he said, "How long is this play going to be?" And I said, "Well, I think it's supposed to be about 3 hours and 15 minutes." And he said, "Really? 3 hours and 15 minutes? I thought that went.
Yeah.
I thought that was out of fashion.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I understand it's worth it. And I said, I understand that they do that because you have to feel like you're in a recording session and that you're there, almost while they're eating pretzels, and you're sort of like just a fly on the wall of this recording session. And about 30 minutes into the first act, he said, I could stay here for hours.
Yeah.
It was a really fun show.
Yeah. Chris, my partner, and I, we go down to the city together all the time. We do like a 2-show day. We'll, drive down, hit 2 shows, come back. And I did Stereophonic without him. And I came home and I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I did it without you. But what's the Tony Awards mean to the Orchard Project? Is it good for you? I mean, to have so many alum in every nominated show?
Yes, I think in a short answer, yes. I think that I have very mixed opinions about an award show that sort of picks one winner over another.
Sure.
And so it's slightly bittersweet because there are actually so many Orchard Project alums that were working on other shows this year that did not get nominated and probably deserved the attention that they get. But the fact is that as a community, the moment that anything gets elevated onto the national stage and allows live performance to feel special, I think is a real win. So I would even say this without Orchard Project people being involved. As a community, being able to put the work of live stage on a national television, platform is such an opportunity for us all to sort of say like, wow, we can get out behind our streaming platform and go into a space and hear other people laugh and cry and scream. And so that in its own, that's really sort of at the end what gets really exciting about it.
Yeah. Last question on the Tony Awards. I understand the ratings were down 14, 15%. Any concerns about that? Or I thought it was an amazing year. I can't remember a year on Broadway similar to this past year.
I'm not that concerned. I think that Broadway's going to have, ups and downs. I do think that the larger question becomes a little bit of the economics of Broadway right now. The cost of production has really increased about 20% in the last few years. So it is an expensive venture to be doing a show on Broadway. And so we're going to have a few years where there are more singles rather than home runs, right? And so matched with the fact that there are singles rather than home runs, you're going to have fewer Hamiltons in that mix. That means that there's going to be less national, there's going to be less national buzz on that singular standout success. But that also means that there's going to be many other shows that end up at touring venues like Proctor's, right? There's going to be more shows that kind of come out of this. There's going to be a little bit of churn, and shows that sort of come through the Broadway machine and ones that may not actually really, quite frankly, deserve to be on Broadway. They might not last too long. But I think in the end, the system will sort of reset itself. And there will be a new audience that is created by even a Tony Awards that doesn't have as many viewers as some in the past.
I promised it was the last Tony question. This is really a Broadway production question. When we look at Broadway and we see that the attendance is down compared to 2019, and some people look at that, but they keep opening shows. They keep there's the schedule is filling up. There are so few houses available. What are we to make of that? Then it looks extremely healthy.
Well, so there's a lot of different things at play in that question. So the first is that I think that Broadway itself, the audience may be down 15%, but at a number of touring venues around the country, the audiences are up, right? So at a number of the touring venues, let's use this example, Mrs. Doubtfire did not make anywhere near its capitalization back on Broadway, has excelled on tour, right? It is one of the top properties on tour.
I hope Rob McClure has a piece of that,
right? And so there's a huge excitement post-COVID of people going and sort of seeing something live, something special within their local community. So that's one aspect of that, that even if Broadway may actually be like a little bit down from its peak, it's still actually, on the whole, nationally extremely healthy. And a lot of the speculation about Broadway, I think, is thinking, oh, what's the long tail of this project, through its long tour? Then the separate part of that question is the fact that Broadway there's like no single lady named Broadway, right? Like there's no single person there. It's like 700 people who all disagree with each other. Right. And are all making their individual decisions based on what they want. And so since there's and some of them have very, very different incentives. The theater owners have enough product wanting to be in their spaces, and they are making enough money as the house that they have very little incentive, quite frankly, to actually be. They have very little incentive to be making sure that every show is a huge success because there's enough at the door.
Right.
Right. So their incentives are slightly misaligned with actually the show's incentives of being successful.
Right.
It's different than, say, if you were a landlord here in Schenectady, you would say, oh, your restaurant is having a tough year. I'll cut you a break on the rent just so that we could keep it going. The theater owners don't care about that. They say there's a guy waiting right behind you and he wants to come in.
Yeah.
Right. And then separately, there are wonderful other entities on Broadway, like the advertising companies and the digital marketing companies and the general managers, who also have enough product that as long as there's something more, they just continue to sort of keep their businesses alive. And they're not necessarily doing better if the show is a success. They're doing a little bit better if the show's a success, but they're not doing markedly better if the show's a success. So a lot of like what we see on the outside as the energy and the health of Broadway is also sometimes a little bit of the energy of the individuals who are Max Bialy-stocking the business. Like a little bit. Like they're like, look, I'm going to continue to actually make money even if the shows don't turn a profit. Right. And so there's a little bit of that happening, and you're actually at the moment seeing a particular conflict between the people who are supporting the work, the investors, and the people who are actually, quote unquote, the house. Right. The investors are being like, whoa, can we actually slow this down? Can we actually sort of really concentrate on high quality work that is going to last, be financially feasible within this ecosystem? And you're seeing, like from my vantage point, you're seeing a little bit of that friction taking place, more so now than I have actually in my experience ever seen it before.
Okay. I want to find out more about you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in New Jersey and Connecticut, but my life and family history actually is sort of connected to the region because my mother grew up in Saratoga Springs.
Oh.
My grandparents ran a tiny little pharmacy on Broadway in Saratoga for, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 years. My grandfather's brother, like what happened was they all grew up in Albany. My grandfather had two brothers. They all went to pharmacy school. One took Schenectady, one took Albany, and one took Saratoga.
My whole family is pharmacy connected. My father was dean at Albany College of Pharmacy.
Well, my grandfather and his two brothers all went to Albany College of Pharmacy.
Yeah, wow.
I still have their graduation pins.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you remember? So not a showbiz family.
No.
Yeah. Do you remember what initially attracted you to theater or performance? Or
I was like a fairly. We moved to Connecticut when I was in fourth grade. I was fairly shy, like for the first few years of being in this new town.
Yeah.
With a bunch of other extremely athletic individuals. I did play soccer, so I held my own.
Yeah.
But when I got to the local high school, I started by doing sports, and then I sort of found that there was this amazing theater program at that local high school in Westport called Staples High School. And really found an extraordinary community, but also a sense of confidence for myself in being able to sort of articulate my own voice, sort of talk about things that I wanted to talk about, and really fell in love with the performing arts there. I also quickly learned that I was not a very good actor, so it was tied. It was tied to a discovery that my role might not necessarily be on stage, but slightly behind it.
So you auditioned. You were in a show. What was your high school show?
Oh, I was everything from Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls for Staples High School to extra number 42 in Fiddler.
Yeah, you can't just bluff your way through Nathan Detroit.
Actually, I think you can bluff your way through Nathan Detroit.
Really?
I will say that this, the most recent production, the one that's in London, shows that you shouldn't bluff your way through Nathan Detroit. But I can say from experience that you can bluff your way through Nathan Detroit.
Oh my goodness! But you got to be pretty good if you can bluff.
I was very lucky that there was a role in musical theater history that only required 2 songs.
So you went on to Yale.
Yep. So I went on to Yale.
And you that's your undergraduate, yes?
Yep.
And what was your major?
So at Yale, I did, there was a program called Theater Studies. So I was a major in Theater Studies. I had a concentration outside of that in psychology. So it would sort of almost be akin to double majoring or a major and a minor. And I was very active in the theater community at Yale. I ran the Yale Dramatic Association, which was the college theater club. And it was at Yale that I started getting excited even more so about directing, which is then what I went to graduate school to study after Yale.
Okay. So any acting at Yale, or you were just...
So there was a very brief attempt at acting at Yale as well. I did, a David Ives play. I did a Christopher Durang play once, and then I did it for a weekend. That's how long it ran.
Okay.
That was it was, and
and these are dramatic society like clubs.
Yeah.
Okay. Directing, did you have a class in it, or?
Yeah, so Yale was unusual in its theater. Like many liberal arts schools, the theater arts program was very much focused on how to use theater as an opportunity to sort of assimilate and engage with the larger world as a whole. And so there were programs, like there were classes on directing and classes on acting, but then there were also classes on the semiotics of performance.
Sure.
And, so very much more literate classes where you had to analyze an opera and a Japanese play and, translate something from Spanish into English. And so it was really great. We had a really good sampling. I would say that the directing classes I took at Yale have stayed with me as foundational texts. Yale's undergraduate program has a small but clear overlap with the graduate school and the programs that take place at the Yale School of Drama. And so I was lucky while I was there to take an acting class, observe an acting class with the head of the acting program at the time, this extraordinary teacher named Earl Gister, who's sort of renowned for the training that he provided to so many Yale School of Drama alums. And the very, very simple way that he broke down Stanislavski and basic acting training into almost 5 simple questions still is how I actually teach and work with actors to this day.
Nice. So were you working with actors? Did you direct? You directed a piece before you went on to get a master's degree.
Yale. So Yale once again had this theory that yes, within the program you're going to within the academic program you're going to quote unquote learn how to think. But then within all those clubs and those societies, you're going to have the opportunity to do. And so, say at the Yale Dramat, I was given the opportunity to direct a production of Dangerous Liaisons with a fantastic cast. Many of them have actually gone on. One of them was just recently in the Dark Materials trilogy on HBO, and another fantastic group of actors. And I directed probably about 4 or 5 shows within the context of sort of undergraduate life while I was there.
Great. And you went on to Scotland. Was there a particular mentor? How did you choose?
I was very, very fortunate when I was looking at graduate schools, and I was still of this. Many people sort of, they do college then high school and in college, and they think, is this really what I'm going to be doing for part of my life? I'm not sure if this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I was very lucky that there were two individuals, one, Arvin Brown, who was running Long Wharf, the local regional theater at the time, and Stan Vojevodsky, who was running the Yale School of Drama at the time. And both of them were fantastic just advisors to me as I was trying to decide what to do. And Stan had recently heard about this program in Scotland that was sort of a one of its kind. It was essentially a fellowship, was a graduate school program, and the only actors that you would work with, if you were in the directing program that was created, the only actors would be paid. So you would understand the dynamic of actually working with a professional actor from the get-go, anytime within this graduate program. There was no, oh, you are directing students. And I thought, oh, if I'm going to be testing out whether or not I want to do this, working with professional actors might be a really, really great test for me to see if I can handle it, to see if I actually really want to, put my life forward into this business. I had never done a junior year abroad. I had never really traveled very much abroad. So this was really a very, formative experience, just going to Scotland for a period of time. I expected I was going to go there and then come back to New York and figure it out.
But I see some credits.
But I ended up moving from Scotland down to London.
Yeah.
I got a good job at the Royal National Theatre as a staff director there on a show, and then as a director on attachment at their R&D lab, which was called the National Theatre Studio. And then from there, worked at the Old Vic and the English National Opera and the Young Vic as a staff director or as a director, working around London in that community, which was an extraordinary learning opportunity.
Yeah, sure. And did you have specific projects that you directed? Could you do things outside of your staff?
Yeah. So the British system is a little bit different than the American system. They actually, because they still have a little bit of a repertory system, they might have a show that's going to be in rep at, say, somewhere like the English National Opera, and they would hire someone to be on staff as the assistant director, but then separately maybe dust off a giant old tome and then direct a revival of a Zeffirelli X, Y, and Z opera. So you'd almost be given the keys to the Zeffirelli car, and you'd be able to do that. And then there'd be 3 months open, right? And you'd have 3 months open, and you could go to Battersea Arts Centre, which is a little fringe theater in South London, and go and direct a tiny little show on your own. And so for me, having the support and the stability of the staff directing opportunity was fantastic. But then I was, meeting young designers and young other writers and other actors and other directors and directing readings and other things on the side. It was a fantastic opportunity to kind of work on a lot of things.
Do you see our, Anglo jealousy? Do you see their system or things that you were able to do, in early in your career? Do you see that you trying to use that in the Orchard Project, or
from a business standpoint, or from the system standpoint, or from
a system standpoint, or the ability to move?
Look, I think that the ability to support early career work and early development work that exists in the UK is very different than what happens in the United States. It's different in a few different ways. One, if you look at an American playwright's CV, it will actually say, these are all the places where I developed my plays.
Right.
They actually, development is a credit. In the United Kingdom, it's not. Right? There is no development ecosystem in the UK except for maybe 2 or so institutions that develop work, the National Theatre Studio being one of them. Very much development is very, very often a commitment towards production, right? And it's a commitment towards production. The other big thing that you start seeing as a contrast that I've hopefully assimilated is that you have to actually work on a lot of projects to habituate artists to making new work and audiences to expose to seeing it. right? Most of the off-Broadway theaters do 4 or 5 shows a year here in New York, right? Cap Rep here does 4 or 5 shows in its season. That's actually considered to be a fairly prolific season. But the Royal Court is doing 18 shows a year, right? The Royal Court's amortizing that risk across 18 different productions. And so as a community, it actually is really healthy for them to be saying, we're not putting everything on this one. It's not like this one has to make it and the rest of them, or we're going to be down for the season. And that's like a little bit of the spirit of the Orchard Project, is that we're richer with abundance rather than saying, this is the one thing we're going to develop and let's do it. The biggest thing that I will say was a formative experience over there that has translated into my experience with the Orchard Project, besides the fact that the Orchard Project was quite honestly born out of a fundraising event at the Old Vic, where somebody actually said, I'll only give money to the Old Vic if you come and look at these facilities in the Catskills. So there was a condition, and that was the birth of the Orchard Project. While I was in the employ of the Old Vic at the time, that funder said, this is my condition of my donation. Well, they look at this old Dirty Dancing resort that I have in Hunter, that I'm on the board of, and that was the birth of the Orchard Project. But the other connection that London has to the Orchard Project is that when I was at the National Theatre Studio, it was actually still early days for that building. It's this building that is the old costume annex of the Old Vic. It's next door to the Old Vic on the South Bank. It's a good 3 or 4 blocks south of the National now, but it's still owned by the National. And it's kind of just like a warehouse full of rehearsal spaces. It's a small little warehouse. And what happens, because of the fact that artists are in rep, actors are in rep at the National, they have these off weeks. During the off weeks, since they're still on salary at the National, the studio takes advantage of their energy and allows them to develop new work. And the woman at the time who was running the studio was this extraordinary woman named Sue Higginson. And the great story about Sue that actually I continue to carry forward was that early in the days of the studio, when she was running it, she saw a comedian and she thought, this comedian's actually like really talented. He should write a play. So she told the comedian that she would give him a week, support the week of work, and that she trusted him, something good would come out of it. And the comedian said, fantastic. I can have a week of work. I can invite my friends. Maybe we'll come up with something. So he came, worked in a room for a week with a bunch of actors, and all they did was play poker. That was all that happened over the course of that week. And at the end of the week, she got a little wind of this, and she said, okay, how did your week go? And he says, great. I've got an idea for a show. Can you give me another week? So she gave him another week. And so a few months later, he came back. He did another week. He played cards again for the entire week with a bunch of actors. And at the end of that week, she said, okay, I've heard that you've been playing cards. Do you actually have a show that's coming out of this or not? He says, yes. No, I have a really, really good idea for a show. I'll deliver a first draft of it to you soon. That play became a play called Dealer's Choice. That writer became someone we all know named Patrick Barber. And that was the beginning of his playwriting career.
Nice.
And that story of trust and how the studio kind of said, you know what? I believe that there is something there. I am going to give you the support to take that risk. And this is a place that does not need to sell tickets, that does not actually need to answer to those market forces, is so amazing. And that has kind of been a guiding force for the Orchard Project since its inception in the one blinking stoplight town of Hunter, New York, back in 2007 and to this day.
Awesome. Where is the Exchange Theater fit into this story?
So the fun history of the Orchard Project is that in 2006 there was this fundraising event for the Old Vic.
Right.
This gentleman invited me up to Hunter to take a look at this space. We started the Orchard Project in 2007, and there was no institutional support for it whatsoever. It was just an idea. It was just a bunch of artists who wanted to say, hey, can we get away somewhere and make risky work without having a script? Peter Finn, who runs the Catskill Mountain Foundation, very generous individual, and was our host for many years, down there in Hunter, was also on the board of a theater company that was undergoing a massive transformation at the time in New York called the Jean Cocteau Rep, a classical theater company.
Oh, yes.
And he said, would you like to take over the Jean Cocteau Rep? It's one of those things where they hand you something, you say, sure, and then you look underneath the hood.
Yeah.
I didn't look underneath the hood.
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn. But we took over the 501c3 of the Jean Cocteau Rep, and the existing Cocteau board wanted it to still be a producing company at that time. And so that was actually what was called the exchange. And so for a few years of transition between 2008 and 2011 or so, the exchange produced a little bit each year. But it also became more and more clear that as the Orchard Project was growing as a development organization, that what we could do, say for $250,000 of budget in supporting a number of projects, would have to only just go to one or two in production. And so it quickly became very clear that our unique selling point, right, what we were able to provide the community as a whole, was a much greater effect in development than in production.
Yeah.
And so a few years after that, the new board decided to just call it the Orchard Project, and that's what it's ever been since.
Okay.
Unusually, the name of the Cocteau is still the same name as the Orchard Project right now. The actual incorporated name of the Cocteau since 1972 was the Association for the Development of Dramatic Arts. And it's perfect for what we do, right? It's actually what we do. We are the Association for the Development of Dramatic Arts. So we have never changed the incorporated name ever since. And it's still the Association for Development of Dramatic Arts. Our DBA over that time has shifted.
Excellent. Moving from Hunter up to Saratoga, what was involved in that?
So in 2014, that was our last year in Hunter. It was also the year that All the Way, a play that we had begun, won the Best Play Tony.
Nice.
And it just became clear. We were supporting about 15 shows a year in Hunter. It was just clear that there wasn't the capacity for us to expand support. And we decided to look at 5 towns around the state. We were fairly adamant that the state, that the Orchard Project remain in New York State, even though there wasn't a actual official reason for it. We wanted to sort of remain New Yorkers. We looked at Saugerties, Woodstock, Hudson, Oneonta, and Saratoga.
Right.
And the last of those visits was in Saratoga. And what was amazing about Saratoga was that the established arts community, Yaddo, Skidmore, SPAC, actually came together to sort of say, how can we make Saratoga welcoming to you? And what was also fascinating was in Saratoga, there wasn't one way to do it. We could have been downtown and sort of rented vacation homes on the east side of Saratoga, which is what we ended up doing for the first few years. We could have been on a horse farm in Schuylerville. We could have been at Skidmore, like City Company. There were many permutations to how we could bring artists from around the country and the world to town to develop new work. And this community, and I don't mean this just about Saratoga, but the Capital Region as a whole, they understand what early development of artistic work is, right? A lot of people don't get that, but I have to credit Yaddo in some way for kind of seeding the vocabulary of the region, saying, oh, there has to be a place where Appalachian Spring gets written. There has to be a place where Invisible Man gets written. There has to be a place where all of that happens. And New York State Writers Institute does the same thing. There's the region is rich with sort of an energy of birthing art. And I think that when we walked in, we had a meeting with the head of Adirondack Trust, Charles Wade at the time, and he said, I know exactly what you do. That was really affirming to sort of have that conversation and have somebody say, what do you need in order for Saratoga to make itself available to you?
That's great. I was there your first summer, 2015. And when I was thinking about Orchard Project in Saratoga and this question about, how did you choose Saratoga? I was thinking because we have a community theater, homemade theater, which has been searching for a space. And my investigation with the theater festival that I'm building, looking for spaces in Saratoga, I'm not seeing, a lot of stages. And when I attended Foreign Body, Gentlemen Soldiers, they were not in theater spaces.
Yes. the answer is yes. The fun thing that I was confronted with when looking at Saratoga was, oh wow, here's all this hardware. But the hardware is kind of slightly odd hardware, right? You have the old bathhouses at the park, for instance, and then you have Universal Preservation Hall, which in some ways is still kind of odd hardware. You have the old library of which is now Saratoga Arts, Cafe Lena. There's all this amazing, bizarre hardware, and I felt like, well, if the community is versed in the language of play development, if it's actually willing to sort of say like, this is rough and ready, we're going to kind of like be part of the narrative of building it. Well, might as well actually lean into that and do a play workshop in a hotel room and do another one in another space. This summer, we're doing one in a winery, right? Like that last year, as you came to, we did one on a farm with a barbecue and a beer tasting.
Pitney?
Yeah, Pitney Meadows.
Pitney Meadows, which Homemade Theater has used for Sound of Music and Secret Garden.
Yeah, and I have learned that this community, the truth is, I think the rest of America is going to learn what we're doing up here in upstate New York. I think that the fact that Lincoln Center Chamber Music and Homemade Theater and Opera Saratoga have done these sort of events in slightly what would be considered alternative venues makes it clear that performance and art and culture can be anywhere. They don't have to be in storied institutions with four walls and grid spaces.
Right.
That many people go to, just as many people go to the New York City Ballet to tailgate as they do to actually go see the ballet.
Yeah.
Right? And that's part of it. That's fun. Yeah. That's okay. We learned very early on that doing cabarets with Bridget Everett and Alan Cumming and Esperanza Spot, like in Saratoga, where you could clearly have a drink with your show, was very important to the fun of actually being part of the generation of new work.
Yeah, Bridget Everett, seminal viewing experience.
Yes, it was also very hot in that room at Universal Preservation Hall.
Yeah, everybody was sweating.
Yeah,
for
many reasons.
And for people who haven't been to the Orchard Project productions, you mentioned the Pitney Farms production. That was Eugene Onegin, done as a bluegrass musical. They're just some of the most creative and really impactful productions that I've seen in the Capital Region. Gentlemen Soldiers, which told this story about a guy graduating from college and going off to World War I. It was all told very minimally with a small cast and just moving around the room, and the audience followed them. It's just an incredible show. Foreign Body, directed by Teresa Rebeck, in a hotel room with John Glover. You're sitting, in his room. So just great stuff. Talking about real estate and, my theater company, Harbinger, we have 4 separate performance sites for this season, and we're scheduling next season. And I was saying that more than reading plays, I'm looking for space. And then it's the matching of the space and the play. We have a space which was a converted elementary school, Joseph O'Brien, in Albany, in Arbor Hill, the Albany Barn. We've done 7 shows there, and it's a massive, cafetorium. But we're looking at new spaces, and we did a photo shoot for the squirrels at Crossgates Mall, and putting the animals on the escalators and
that's fantastic,
in the massage chairs. So now I'm pursuing Crossgates Mall to, see how I can reserve a space a year in advance when they have such, tenancy, fluctuating all the time. But it becomes a challenge. Like, what is the show matching the show to the venue?
I wish that as you're explaining with Harbinger, I think it's the same for the Orchard Project. Every year we sort of start again a little bit from scratch, right? But we, what is interesting about the region is that this is not as much true in New York as it is like a city like Philadelphia, where there's this kind of adventurous use of space, and so. There was a yoga collective that wanted to build space over in, the old Roosevelt 2 at the park. That's something that can only happen if not only there's somebody interested in making use of the space, but if there's someone on the other side that's also interested in the use of it in a creative way. And obviously, the places like Crossgates or the mall at Saratoga, Wilton Mall, right. They want to have long-term tenants, but I have noticed that there's this wonderful engagement with making use of space in the area that has been really, really helpful to us. So, one year we used a ballroom at the Inn at Saratoga as a space for an event. We might use it again this year. When we did something at Pitney Meadows Farm last year, that was really exciting. Talking to the park about doing things over in the park. There is this community creativity in trying to make it happen. I think it's a fact of life that we might not have ongoing spaces. We're not a permanent tenant in somewhere. We don't want to actually have the carrying costs of being a permanent tenant in any of those spaces. So it comes your question comes with a little bit of the flip side is actually is worth it, right? Yeah. The reason that this is I don't want to take the conversation into a down spot,
right?
But going into the creation of the Orchard Project in 2007, but also into our move to Saratoga in 2015, there were nationally probably there's only maybe 5 major organizations in the country that support the level of work that we support. And I mean, in 2015, there were only 5. 3 of them are gone. 3 of those organizations have shut down because of the last few years. And one of the reasons that's really difficult to keep a nonprofit operating, particularly one that doesn't have the opportunities for earned income of ticket sales that a Proctor's or another producing house would have, is real estate, right? Real estate becomes a real challenging ongoing cost. So the fact that we were renters during COVID and not owners during COVID is probably one of the reasons why we survived COVID, right? We had our gala on March 9th of 2020, right? That was the night that we raised essentially all of the money that we were going to need to then spend that summer in Saratoga of 2020. And on March 12th, the world shut down. And then we all woke up a little bit later in March and we said, what do we do? Well, we don't have to spend money on rent because we didn't have anything yet. We're going to spend all that money on our artists. And we went from supporting 20 shows to 40 because we actually just pushed all of it into more artist support. So that's the flip side of the annoying real estate search every year. Is the too small to fail nimbleness of it.
Yeah, but you also get the huge entertainment factor out of going to see an Orchard Project show, and it's like, where is it, and what's that entail? Am I going to have barbecue, or am I going to, if you want to go into the theater and see something new, well, what better way than to go into a space that you've never been in before, and say, oh,
right. We think so. Last year when we read Eugene Onegin as a piece on paper, the writer was thinking this is a piece that's going to go up in a normal proscenium arch stage with a normal audience. And I said, well, have you tried it as a hootenanny?
Yeah.
have you thought about what it could be if it just sits down in Saratoga, maybe goes, Dorset was the original commissioner of the piece, right? Like, so maybe goes to Dorset in its eventual life, then goes to Chautauqua. These are the things that we're talking about right now with that piece next. It's opened up entire opportunities. And as a piece that actually brings a community together, it now sets itself up as something that, because it's a bluegrass jam, in each town, somebody new can join. Right? In each place that it lands, somebody who can join. That can't happen in the same way when you're in four walls, in a Pross Arch theater.
Yeah. We started with me saying that I have received this email about Fiasco, who is joining you. Is it first time?
So this is actually Fiasco's official third time with the Orchard Project. They were a resident company with us for like a single session in our old location of Hunter. And one of the things that we did last year, just to take a step back, last year was the first year that the Orchard Project became resident in the summer at Skidmore College. So we moved our facility use from downtown Saratoga for rehearsal space and housing over to Skidmore's campus, and it's actually proven to be a wonderful, wonderful partnership. With the establishment of that partnership, we thought, how do we actually expand on that partnership? And we started working with Fiasco, a past resident artist company, and said, would you like to have a multi-week residency at the Orchard Project together, developing multiple pieces rather than the sort of normal one that a company would have. So this year, they're going to have about 8 to 10 artists at the Orchard Project over 3 successive weeks. And they'll work on 3 different shows during each of those weeks. And as part of our relationship with them, they're going to do workshops with the upstate creative community, some focused at younger learners and some focused at college age and lifelong learners, which are fantastic. Fiasco is one of the greatest Shakespeare companies in the United States. So being able to have them in the region for that period of time is really a treat.
Yeah, and some area listeners, viewers may know Fiasco because they were at Classic Stage Company this past season with Pericles, which I saw at the Barrow Street many years ago. And they also had a production of Into the Woods, which was all the found objects in the attic, and they which had a tour, which came through Proctor's, and it was much celebrated. Brown University graduates?
Yeah, so they're mostly Brown University graduates. There's a core ensemble and then kind of an extended ensemble outside of that.
And they're incredibly creative, and they build pieces out of found props and, just wonderfully inventive and theatrical. What else is on for this summer?
So this summer we're going to have 3 sessions. So each session is about 8 to 9 days. They're a little bit like a sprint. And in each session we're working on about 4 to 5 projects. And this is what we call the performance lab, right? Our lab that's focused on live performance. And so in this session we have an adaptation of Don Quixote for 2 individuals that's going up at Soul Pepper in Toronto next year. We have another team working on a piece for Mayi Theater Company in New York City. And then actually we have members of our episodic lab also in residence right now, our TV program that we launched in 2018, but has grown exponentially since we launched it in 2018. Then we reboot in a week or so. We have a number of pieces coming, everything from a musical adaptation of a documentary, a great documentary called The Painter and the Thief, to another musical that's going to be going up at good speed about Jack the Ripper and Sherlock Holmes, called Dust and Shadow, and some writers in residence, including Sarah Burgess, who writes for American Horror Story, and then that graduates to our final session, which is the session in which we'll be developing pieces that will include those that we'll be doing the public sharings of, and in that final session, some of the pieces that we're working on, including Fiasco's work that will be shared in that last week. We have 5 composers in residence that will be sharing sort of new musicals that they're working on. We have a piece called The Haunting of Shirley Jackson, which is written by Kate Wallet, who's on the playwriting faculty here at University of Albany, and has Cassie Beck, who is starring Cassie Beck, who's just starred in the national tour of What the Constitution Means to Me, coming up to work on that piece. And it culminates with, in that final weekend, a sharing of the new musical Safety Not Guaranteed, which is a piece that we're going to be developing with Nick Blamier, who's a musical theater actor and writer, who was just in SpongeBob on Broadway, was just in the movie Maestro, playing A. Comden, and Ryan Miller, who is the lead singer and composer for the rock band Guster. And so it's an adaptation of the movie that came out in 2012 that was like a cult hit movie that Aubrey Plaza was in. And that musical will be developed by us. We'll share it on July 13th. At a really fun event at Saratoga Winery that we'll be taking over for the evening. And then it will then go back into rehearsal in New York City because it will be opening the Brooklyn Academy of Music season this coming fall.
Nice.
On the main stage there. And that will be announced actually as we're here right now. It's probably what I'm getting alerts about. It got its announcement finally today that BAM is announcing that show will be coming out.
Excellent. Very exciting. Can't wait for that. You kind of like threw me with this press release announcement.
It's a mouthful too. We're working. There's quite a few pieces in there.
Yeah. So the public performances are the 11th through the 13th. There's something I noticed in the press materials about open rehearsals.
Yeah. So we'll be doing with each of the other sessions. We sort of open the building up for artists and other industry who would like to come and just sort of like watch work in process. We just like sort of stay in touch with us and come, and we do open rehearsals on a lot of the work because so much of what the artists who come up or come out, because we have artists from all around the country coming to Saratoga this summer, so much of what they're dying for is a little bit of peer feedback, right? A little bit of give and take with other artists. So the more that we can populate those events with conversation, the better, right? So we use the term open rehearsal almost for everything. We try to say this is an open rehearsal, even when we do like that thing with Guster on July 13th. We'll still call it an open rehearsal, right? Even though it's got a full band and 8 actors, and it's going to have light, sound, and everything. That's an open rehearsal. Come and join us, have some fun.
Great. And I noticed, Orchard Project has so many things going on and going out to everyone. As you were mentioning, where all these different projects are going. I know I'm heading to Hudson Valley Shakespeare this summer to see Penelope.
Oh, so that was last. So Penelope
right,
that we developed, right? So that we developed. So we developed that at Cafe Lena 2 summers ago. It went to Hudson Valley last summer, and then to Signature Theater in D.C.
Oh,
and it's going to have a few performances at the Public at Joe's Pub this coming summer. I have a strong hunch that it will continue actually having a fantastic life. A piece that we developed last summer called We Are Your Robots, that we shared at Saratoga Arts on one of those days of sharings, is going to be opening Rattlestick Theater season in New York City in a co-production with Theater for a New Audience at the Polanski in Brooklyn. So their big theater in Brooklyn. And that's Ethan Lipton's new musical. A piece that we developed now, I guess it was 2015, our first year in Saratoga, was originally called Banging It. It was produced at La Jolla Playhouse, was just produced this past spring at Birmingham Rep in the UK, and is now actually moving towards other productions as well.
I saw a listing for that somewhere recently.
Just
I have to ask, because I'm such a fan, Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, what did he do at Orchard?
So Brandon came, I believe it was in 2000, it might have been 13 or 14, I have to just remember the year, but he came to work on an octoroon. So that the writing for an octoroon, and according to him, because I saw him recently, he also began work on the Comeuppance at that time that he was in residence at the Orchard Project.
Really?
Yeah. And so those 2 plays were begun in residency. We when we invite somebody, we know that things might change for them, right? Amy Herzog, who just had 2 shows on Broadway this season with Mary Jane and Enemy of the People, when she came to the Orchard Project back in its old location, she came with a commission for Steppenwolf, but left with another play. Yeah. Right? She threw it out 2 days into the residency. So that very often somebody may say, oh, I've come with this, I may leave with that. And so that was what happened with Brandon as well.
Yeah, and Amy Herzog, Tony nominated for both Best Revival and Best Play.
And Best Play.
Now we come to the time in the program where I ask the play that changed your life.
There are many plays that changed my life. I sort of go, if it's okay to take it into just sort of generalized theater crush.
Yeah.
I remember getting into a cab at the airport in Glasgow when I was going for my interview for graduate school. And the cab driver asked me what I was doing there, and I told him I was there for graduate school and an interview at graduate school. And he says, "In what?" And I said, "In theater." And he says, "Oh, theater. Have you seen the last Robert Lepage play? You know, this famous Quebecois avant-garde theater director that I had only seen on video and had never seen actually anything live of." And I said, "No, I haven't." He says, "Oh, I just saw this piece. It was done here in Glasgow. It was fantastic." And I thought, the cab driver is telling me what to see. I love this. Then the next year, while I was in graduate school, Lepage was in town with a piece called Geometry of Miracles, a piece that he had created about Frank Lloyd Wright. And I saw it. It was at the Tramway. It actually provided me with an opportunity to meet him. Actually, we became sort of in touch at that time. I then went to visit him in Quebec City a few years later to watch him develop another piece. And I cannot say more positive things about any creative artist that I've ever seen work, because his sense of ebullience at taking artistic risks and developing in front of an audience is so inspiring. You know, he used to say, I would say, "How do you know if what you're creating is going to be useful?" And he says, "We never know. All we do is we just leap up in the air, we orbit a little bit, we look down, and we say, there might be a play there. There might be something there. Let's try to land on that." And we never land on it, but we sometimes get closer, and then we leap up again, and we orbit. He does it, by the way, in a really nice French-Canadian accent.
Yeah.
So you have to imagine.
It loses something in the
It loses
translation.
something. He says, "Orbit, we orbit, we orbit." It's wonderful. And I've, even things of his that don't fully hit the mark, I still think are unbelievably exciting. I think that he is a class act. He is just one of the most creative theater makers to ever grace this earth. He's just so exciting. So anything that he has made, I would sort of put in the play that changed my life category.
Excellent. Well, Ari Edelson, thank you so much.
Patrick, thank you. I'm really, really grateful to be here and part of this community.
Likewise, I'm sure. It's such an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you. And we'll have to, I'm sure I'll see you this summer. And you'll have to come back and see what I build with my festival.
Oh, definitely. Let me know how I can be. Yeah, let me know how I can be helpful and part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Ari Edelson, and I'll see you in the theater soon.